edition of Car Time Radio. Dan Watson sitting in for Jay Zimbauer today. And sometimes, like that song says, I think I'm running a little low on torque myself. So we are here and ready for a great show. In fact, we're probably going to bring Mr. Jay Zimbauer in the second segment of the show. And, hey, it'll be the best of Jay and one of his recorded answers. But we'll do that to spice things up a little bit and hear from the master himself, even though he happens to be off in cooler weather climate somewhere enjoying himself. But he will be back soon. All right, today I remind you that I am the oil guy, not the ASE certified mechanic. So call me and ask me questions about oil, diesel, gasoline, any type of synthetic oil products you want to talk about. If you want to ask questions about what to put in your boat, your motorcycle, your lawnmower, your diesel truck, your car, your farm tractor, whatever you want to ask that question about, be glad to talk about it. Now, you can call in here, as you hear every week, all the time, but it's really easy. 407-674-1025. That's 407-674-1025. Easy. If you're outside the area, you don't want to waste a dime or two, then use the toll-free 855-545-1025, and you can call in that direction. So, hey, keep me some company here today. Like I said, my torque converter's running a little low on torque also, so give me some calls, and let's talk about different kinds of products for your car. I've got some questions that I have received during the week. They come in to my website, and that is thelubepage.com, and delighted to have you send some questions in via the Lube page and give me something to respond to. I get quite a few questions during the week, and I'm pretty good about answering those by email. Might take me a day or two, but I do get those emails answered. So, again, that is thelubepage.com, and I look forward to receiving those. Looks like we got somebody bailing me out here, Mr. Producer, giving me a chance to answer a question. So we're going to take line one. John from Orlando. What can I do for you?
Hi, yeah. I've got a question in regards to synthetic oil and filters. I've been using Mobil 1 full synthetic for a while in my vehicles. And, up until recently, they didn't offer a 15,000-mile filter like they say their oil's good for. And they recently came out with a filter, and I'm hearing from one of our local stores that filter's kind of like hogwash. I was just looking for a little insight on that.
Well, I haven't looked at the Mobil 1 filter. It's probably what it is, the Mobil 1 filter. But I will tell you the technology is available to make a 15,000-mile oil filter. It all has to do with the filter medium and how many grams of particulate you can store in that filter. It's very easy to rate and understand. Now, like I said, I'll just tell you straight up, I haven't looked at that Mobil filter. I have never known Mobil to make claims that they can't back up. So now you've kind of piqued my interest. I'm going to have to go do some research on that and see what they're making the filter medium out of. If it's made out of a good high-performance microglass, then it should have no trouble going the 15,000 miles, depending upon, of course, the surface area, how big the filter is, and what the volume of oil that it has to filter is in the particular vehicle. What kind of car you got?
Currently, I'm been maintaining my wife's Acura, the 2005 MDX, and then I had a 2005 Dodge Ram, but they didn't have the filter out when I had the Ram, which was 7-quart capacity. The Acura is 4.5 quart capacity. It's a 5-20 weight in that.
Right, and what you have when you run, listen, here's a couple things to know about filtration. When you run an oil such as Mobil 1, which, by the way, is, in my opinion, there's AMSOIL and Mobil sit at the top of the scale on how they make their synthetic oils. Okay, now, a high-quality synthetic oil basically is a pure base. It has no impurities in it. Regular motor oil conventional motor oil can have up to 25% of the oil itself can be impurities, not actually refined out. Now, those impurities will combine with byproducts of combustion and make particles that will actually end up being trapped by the filter. So one of the things that you actually do is you give the filter an easier job when you run a high-performance synthetic. Now, when you're looking over at the volume of oil you have, the reason I ask that is because the more volume of the oil you have, the better the oil is able to withstand the rigors of its operation. In other words, 7 quarts that you have in an engine has a lot of backup additives and a lot of dispersants and detergents, and that oil will run cleaner over its time than a smaller volume of 4 quarts. Of course, that then again depends a little bit on whether you're in a V6, a V8, or a 4-cylinder. So just let me say this. I'll do some research, and next week when I come back, I'll have the straight skinny on the Mobil 1 15,000-mile rated filter. Right now, if I was to try to say too much, I would just be blowing smoke because I haven't done the research on it, and I like to talk with facts, not with assumptions.
Sounds good.
Okay, so next week I'll know. I'm here one more time for Jay till he gets back, and I will have an answer to that, and we'll talk a little bit more about filters next week when I do that research.
Okay. Do you have time for one more quick question?
I do. Make it quite quick.
I've got a 2015 Challenger RT that I just purchased. I haven't even had my first oil change on it. When should I switch over to full synthetic on that?
My advice to everybody is leave what's in the car until its first scheduled oil change. And the reason I say that is they claim you don't have to do it as much, but I think you still need to make sure those rings are really well seated, and they'll be seated better with the oil that comes from the factory, because an oil like Amsoil synthetic or Mobil, which I know you're using in the other car, they give such great protection that it's hard to seat the rings using those high-performance synthetic oils. So leave that original oil in. It'll be probably 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles, and change it then, and you're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, let me go straight to Matt from Port Orange.
Hi there.
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
I'm good. I have several tools that use two-stroke motor oil, such as a weed eater, a power washer, and several small and large generators. And when I go to purchase that two-stroke motor oil, I seem to only find it in small 8-ounce bottles or 16-ounce bottles. And when I see right alongside of it big gallon jugs of two-stroke motor oil made for marine use, I was always wondering, couldn't I just buy a gallon of that stuff and use it? And if I cannot use the marine two-stroke motor oil, can you find the regular two-stroke motor oil in gallon jugs anywhere? And I'll take your answer offline. I'm driving, and I'd rather listen to it in the car.
Okay. Here's the first part of your question. Can you use the marine in the lawn equipment or the two-stroke that's not marine? And my advice to you is no. And here's why. Two-stroke oils are tailored, if they're manufactured correctly, they are tailored for temperature. And what a lot of people aren't aware of is the reason that you put a thermostat in a outboard motor is not to cool it, but to make it get some temperature. Outboard motors suck up water, and they run a high volume through the engine. If I don't limit that, they will run too cold, actually too cold. So I am doing my best to keep an outboard motor running 150 degrees. That's what I'm trying to do. So I have to tailor the additives for that two-stroke, assuming it's going to have a hard time getting above 150 degrees. Now, when I run air-cooled two-stroke engines, they tend to run greater than 200 degrees all the time, okay? So I actually tailor the anti-scuff and the additives in my two-stroke oil for a temperature range. And that marine outboard motor oil would be designed to run in a much cooler condition than what you would have in your lawn equipment. So now that answers that question. The second part is, where can you get a gallon? Listen, I'm going to tell you my best advice here, and this is the truth. You got anything that you depend upon for two-stroke equipment, run somebody's synthetic two-stroke engine oil. Why do I say that? Well, because there is no comparison between two strokes. Petroleum two-stroke oils have to just load the oil up heavily with zinc in order to get by with not scuffing up the engine. That's the anti-wear additive. Synthetic two-strokes, particularly the one I'm the most familiar with is the Amsoil, but there's an Optimax out there and some others that are synthetic. Amsoil uses a 100% ester-based base stock. That's the best you can use. And then they put what they call high-performance polymer anti-wear additives in it, and it's rated in the industry as a no ash or very, very low or zero ash product. And what that means is that if you burn the oil, it would leave no ash because all of the additives in it burn cleanly. Why is that important? Because in a two-stroke engine, it's kind of like an air generator. It has to have air come in and force the exhaust out all at the same time. If there's anything that impedes that, it will not get a fresh charge of fuel and air in the cylinder when it gets ready for combustion. And most of the time, what messes up every two-stroke engine is carbon buildup in the exhaust port, and it can't get the exhaust out in order to get new fuel and air mixture in. And that exhaust builds up based upon excess zinc sticking, and then the carbon sticking to the zinc, and it just builds up like calcified. It just builds up in the exhaust, and pretty soon the exhaust port is cut in half or worse, okay? So when you use the low-ash, high-performance synthetic two-stroke like Amsoil makes, it burns clean. It burns out. There is no residue left. There's no exhaust carbon to build up, so you can go on and on and on with it, and they do. They just run forever. So you can buy that. I don't know exactly where you were calling from, but call me off in the week at my number, which is 800-370-2986, and I can direct you someplace to where you can buy that two-stroke oil in quarts. You can buy it in gallons. You can get it in 8-ounce bottles, and you can get it in pillow packs. So you can get it any measure you want, and I can almost guarantee you the day that you shift over to that, you will never go backwards. I don't know anybody that doesn't use that oil that's absolutely amazed how clean their equipment runs, how well it runs, and how long it runs. So I've run a little long, and we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to put Jay on the air with one of his classic Jay auto questions that he's going to answer for you. And then I'll be back after Jay. So we're going to take a break and pay some bills. We'll be back in a few minutes.
The mechanic raised up from under my hood, and he shook his head and said, "This ain't good."
Scott, how are you tonight?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Great. What kind of troubles you got, Scott?
I've got a 2013 Ford F-150. Had some vibration when braking at around 20,000 miles. It progressively got worse and worse.
Okay.
Took it into the dealer. They turned the rotors, said it was warped rotors.
Yep.
Now I'm having the same problem again about 9,000 miles later.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if it's something else they should be checking in the brake system that's causing the problem.
Sure. Okay, let me ask you a couple questions about this. Is it two-wheel or four-wheel drive?
Two-wheel drive?
Okay. Do you do any towing with the vehicle?
No, very, very little. I do have a boat that I do tow occasionally, but
Okay.
It's probably been 6 or 8 months since I've even towed it one time. So.
Gotcha. Okay. So right now you've got what, almost 30,000 miles on it then?
Yeah, it's right about 29,000, and like I said, it's light duty. My wife drives it back and forth to work.
Gotcha. Okay.
Very, very light duty.
Right on. So her driving habits, is she like an I-4 driver, or is she just on the road, minimal stopping? I mean, what kind of driving scenario is she in?
Yeah, in town, low speed, back and forth to work, probably, a couple stoplights between her and work and back home.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I don't want to get her in trouble, but tell me a little bit about her braking habits. Is she someone that, and this is not a bad thing, I mean, just different drivers brake differently. I mean, some people, they hit the brakes, just at the last moment pulling up. Others, they roll to a stop very slow and gingerly. Is she somewhere in between that, or maybe an aggressive breaker?
Probably somewhere in between, but on probably the lower
Okay.
side of that.
All right. So here's some of the problems we deal with these modern late model vehicles with the brake rotors. The first problem we run into is these brakes create a lot of heat, a whole lot of heat. And typically when we get a brake rotor that becomes distorted and warped, and then the manufacturer, the dealer, or whoever resurfaces that rotor, you have to be very careful. And here's the problem. The new rotor, when it's brand new, has a minimum thickness specification. And what we have discovered in the last probably 5 years, the manufacturers are giving us a minimum thickness. Well, that means that's the thinnest that rotor can be and legally and safely still be utilized. The problem comes in is even if you resurface that brake rotor and you bring it back smooth again, two problems. One, it should be done with an on-the-vehicle lathe, which means the brake rotor is never pulled off. The equipment is attached to the vehicle. And the reason we want that is today's modern vehicles, we need to cut the rotors to the center line of the hub or spindle to be able to account for any run-out or manufacturing variances in that component, and that will 100% true the rotor. So that's the first problem. It has to be an on-the-car cut to make sure it's precisely dead center where it needs to be. If you don't do it on the vehicle, then you run the risk of this anomaly that you've got occurring again. Now, if it was done with an on-the-vehicle brake lathe and it was cut, a lot of times what we find is even if you turn that rotor true and even if it's still within specifications, we have found in numerous occasions, because you've removed even as little as 10,000ths of an inch of material off that brake rotor, it cannot dissipate the heat that is typically generated, and it just continues to warp. So typically what you run into on some of the late model Fords are worse for it because of the metallurgy and the size of the rotor. And that's a problem. A lot of brake rotors are actually cast from recycled materials. So we don't have the amount of nickel content in the iron that we used to have for price reasons and also for weight reasons. So then what happens is you as a consumer have a rotor that gets warped, resurface it, and it's true. It's still within specs, which means it still should be usable. But because it's now thinner, it's more susceptible to heat warpage, and it usually ends up warping it again. So I would be going back to your dealer and have them just recheck it, find out which way they did it, and obviously there continues to be a problem. They need to take care of it. Now, finally, they also need to check the rear brakes to make sure the rear brakes are staying adjusted, because if the rear brakes get out of adjusted, it will cause the front brakes to do most of the stopping. So they got to make sure the rear brakes are self-adjusting on that truck, and if they're working properly, they should stay in adjustment. So as long as the rear brakes are working, I suspect that more than likely it was either a situation where they didn't quite cut the rotors fully true because they didn't use an on-the-car lathe, or they cut them down so close to the specifications that the rotor just can't dissipate the heat.
All right, that was my concern, that they were eventually, when it's out of warranty, going to say, well, this is a wear and tear item.
Right.
Now it's just kind of your build.
And it's going to be a customer service issue, because most manufacturers have a policy which says if the brakes are vibrating, they will resurface or replace the rotors one time under warranty. And if it has to happen a second time, then they want you to pay for it, because what they're really trying to say is you're too aggressive of a braker, which is not the case.
Yeah, I've got a 2007 Nissan Pathfinder with 170,000, and I probably am an aggressive driver, aggressive braker. whatever, and have never had an issue with a warp
Right.
rotor.
Right,
So,
exactly.
on this vehicle. So,
Exactly.
is there an
right.
option to buy a heavy-duty rotor if I can run into this problem?
Yeah, there is. And what we do is, and we usually don't go this route unless we got somebody that's towing heavy loads or it's just an ongoing problem. But you can buy high-performance drilled and slotted rotors, which have a better nickel content and they run cooler, but also going with a different brake pad. The brake pads that are on your vehicle new are a very, very hard material. It's a ceramic and metallic composition, and it creates a lot of heat. But it is the best for the best stopping power. You can go to a full ceramic, which will give you just about the same braking distances and performances, but it will not heat the rotors as much.
All right.
So, got a couple options there, but I'd be looking to the manufacturer to step up and do what's right.
And welcome back to Car Time Radio. Had that great tip on brakes and how to keep things going from Jay Zimbauer. We brought him in out of cyberspace since he's off on vacation. And this is Dan Watson sitting in for Jay today. And in the first segment, had a couple of really good questions, one about two-stroke oil and the other one about filtration. So if you've got a question on anything to do with oil, filters, hey, give me a call, 407-674-1025. That's 407-674-1025, or toll-free 855-545-1025. And we'll certainly entertain those questions. I've got a few here that came in during the week on my from my website, and that website is thelubepage.com. Real simple, thelubepage.com. If you go there, you'll find a place where you can send me some questions via that website. I always get back to people and answer you within 2, 3, 4 days at the most, because my schedule can get busy at times. But I like to get those questions and answer people's questions, and hey, they keep sending them, so I keep answering them. So, again, that's thelubepage.com. Now, we talked a little bit about filtration in that first question, and as I told that gentleman, next week when I come back one more week for Jay before he's off vacation, I will give you some details on filtration because he asked a good question, and, hey, you should get an idea of how filters are rated and so forth, and I'll take a look at those Mobil 1 filters and have some answers next week so that I can give you some facts and not just blow smoke, because smoke usually is just smoke. We want to get some facts out. So, all right, now one of the questions I had during the week from a guy named Ben in Winter Garden, and Ben has a 2001 Chevy Suburban. Has 168,000 miles on it, and he says, I don't know much about the history, so he must have just bought this car. Yeah, he says, in fact, in his question, he did buy it. Says, I want to change over to AMSOIL. Is there anything special I have to do? Well, when you got 168,000 miles on a vehicle and you bought it and you don't know specifically how well it's been cared for, yeah, you got to be careful about doing the changeover. And the reason is that when you bring AMSOIL synthetic into the picture, it is a very, very high detergent oil. It will clean that engine and clean it very well. After you run it for, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000 miles, the inside of that engine will be spotless. It'll clean all the varnish, all the sludge out. And so if that engine is really sludged up, then you're going to have to consider that and have, ways of dealing with it, because if you were to come in with AMSOIL, a good load of AMSOIL, and took no other precautions, and you had a really sludged up engine, the AMSOIL will do what it's made to do. It'll clean that engine out. It'll drop all that sludge and stuff down into the oil pan. There is some chance that it might get into the screen, the pickup screen for the oil pump, and you could end up with some fluctuating oil pressures and heart palpitations as you see them and all those kind of things. So you don't have to do that. What you have to do with a high-mileage car is the first thing you could do is to make a really good engine flush from AMSOIL. You could run that through, and that would probably do about all you need in the transition. However, I recommend that when somebody does the flush and you install the AMSOIL Signature Series, to go ahead and use an inexpensive filter. Pick one up, I don't know, somewhere at Kmart, if there's any Kmarts left. Pick one up somewhere that's still around, okay, Target or somewhere. Anyway, a cheap filter. Put it on the car and run that cheap filter for about 1,000 miles, no more than 1,500, and then you can spin the filter off and put on a good filter, which would be, at this point, you could put the Amsoil filter on, top it off with oil, and then go on out and make your first oil change somewhere around 7,500 miles. What you're doing is you did a flush, you got a lot of the big stuff out of the way. Now you put in the highly detergent Amsoil Signature Series. It begins to clean the engine. You use an inexpensive filter that's trapping all that stuff. And then that filter gets loaded pretty fast, so you take it off in about 1,500 miles. Then you put on the good quality filter, and then you run it on out to 7,500 miles, and then you change all the oil and filter. And that's a good way to shift over a high-mileage vehicle that you're not familiar with its history. You don't know how well it's been taken care of. If you can have a high-mileage vehicle that's had really good oil changes done, routine, so forth, you have very little to worry about. But when you don't know because you bought it used, you don't know what its condition is, that's when you have to be a little careful and be prudent about it. Now, anytime you're in that situation, all you got to do is give me a call or go to my website and ask me to walk you through it, and I'll give you all the information that you need. All right, looks like we got Larry calling us, my goodness, all the way from Tampa, asking another oil filter question. So lay it on me, Larry.
Terrific program. We've got a 2000 Chevy Suburban with 250,000 miles on it, recently acquired, and we were trying to determine what was the best oil filter to use for the car. The problem being that some of the AC filters, they went to an environmentally friendly filter that's very poorly performing, and the filter itself is surprisingly small for an 8-cylinder engine. I just was wondering what your thoughts might be, whether a K&N filter or what would be the best filter we could get for that engine.
Well, there's a couple things to consider, and I will tell you that I don't know the current ratings on the K&N, but one of the things you have to keep in mind, sometimes what you end up with filters is people will tout high flow capability, and that's wonderful, but you're also to get that high flow, sometimes you put in a weaker filter medium so that you can get this inordinate high flow, okay? Now, K&N, they produce filters and products for racing applications, meaning that they're not really trying to make something which is designed for the everyday driver. So you don't worry too much in a race car about how long you're going to run a filter because you may be changing oil every 2 weeks, and so it's not a big deal. Now, looking at automotive filters, okay? Now, all you filter guys out there, manufacturers, don't call the show and complain if I don't mention your filter, okay? I'm going to give some straight-out opinions here from me, and that doesn't mean they're the law. That's just my opinion. Now, I say that, Larry, so that nobody comes after me on the radio for not talking about their filter. But I will tell you this. There are Napa Platinum filters. That's the name of them. Napa has 3 or 4 layers. They have a very cheap filter. They have a Napa Silver, a Napa Gold, and now they have a Napa Platinum filter. Now, that Platinum filter is more expensive, and it's worth every dime of it. It's made very well, okay? And just like I was telling somebody earlier, Amsoil has a line of filters called EA filters, Efficiency Absolute. They're more expensive. The technology is there to make an excellent filter. What all these companies worry about is whether anybody will buy it because it costs more money, okay? So you get into that weighing the chances, what am I going to do with this if it's too expensive? Well, Napa Platinum is a more expensive filter because it is a very much better filter, okay? So I know that one is top of the line. Wix makes some very good filters, okay? And you can go over to, there's some Pure One filters that rank out really well. There's some Mobil One filters that do well, and there's some Amsoil EA filters. But for where you are in Tampa and finding something immediately, I think I would go to the Napa and find the Napa Platinum filter, and that would be the filter I'd buy if I was looking for the best one readily available at a parts store.
No, very good advice. That's what we're going to do, and thank you for the great help, and it's a wonderful program.
Well, thanks for listening, and thanks for calling.
You bet.
All right. Great call. We're on the break. I love it when we get calls. These breaks just come quickly. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back and finish. Welcome back to Car Time Radio. Dan Watson sitting in for Jay Zimbauer today. This is the final segment of the show. We've got time to take a call. That number, 407-674-1025. That's 407-674-1025. Call quickly, and we'll have time to get it in this last segment. Great questions today. Filters are important. I mean, I cannot tell you how really poorly made some filters are. And there's no reason to get into which ones they are. Those are the kind of things that you can do research on the Internet and find out yourself. But if the price is too good, it's too good. I'm telling you, you can't build a quality filter and then sell it for $3 or $4. Just can't do it. And so you get what you pay for when it comes to filtration. And you need to have a good filter. The tolerances in these cars are so tight. Running anything other than a high-quality filter is just asking for trouble and long-term wear, because if you let that oil get really highly, abrasive, then it'll cause some erosion due to that particulate. Now, over the last few times I've been on the radio, I've been trying to tell people that you need to be careful depending upon the vehicle you're driving to make sure you got the right oil. And in particular, if you're driving around in a European auto, you need to really pay attention. You see, Europe has a different system to classify their oil. They have an organization, we'll just use the abbreviation, it's the ACEA, whereas here we have the API. Okay, now, if you go to buy oil and it's classified here as SN, that means it's the latest and greatest for automotive gasoline application. But if you go to Europe, they have A1, A2, A3, A4, and A5. Then they have B1, B2, B3, B4, and B5. And they also have C1, 2, 3, and 4. Oh, my goodness, what in the world could all of those things mean? Well, they all do mean something. And, for example, the C ratings are their rating for protecting the exhaust system they have on these cars. In Europe, of course, they're like California when it comes to very, very hard emission standards. So they've got very highly tuned exhaust systems and catalytic converters that are state-of-the-art, all this stuff to protect the environment. That's wonderful. But they also tailor oil so that you can't have carryover and poison those catalytic converters. And in their system, they use a thing they call SAPs. That is, it's talking about the sulfated ash and phosphorus and sulfur that's in the oil as part of the additives, and you're limited on that. So now all of a sudden you got this oil that if it's could be high saps, mid saps, or low saps. See, we're talking all kinds of Greek here. What in the world am I talking about? But that's the reason I'm telling you is if you own a European auto, you can't just go put API SN rated North American oil. You have to make sure it actually meets the requirements of the manufacturer. Recently I had a customer, person I was talking to, who has a Mercedes-Benz and ran a lot of the wrong oil for a period of time, and really just before this vehicle was going off of its warranty, his exhaust system went to pieces. The catalytic converter was poisoned. He had all kinds of problems. Well, he worked it out because they knew what had happened, and he really, as a courtesy, really from Mercedes-Benz, managed to get this thing done on warranty because it was a $14,000 repair. Now, these things are expensive. They are very, very high-tech, and the only thing you can do is know that you have to put the right oils and lubes in your European autos. Had another discussion with a mechanic here in town, great shop. They work on these cars, and they've had numerous BMWs come in with the turbo shot. Just, bang, 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 flinging around. Turns out people have been running whatever oil they wanted in there, right? Well, there are very specific high-performance oil requirements for BMWs that are turbocharged. Guess what? A turbo's expensive. By the time you spend $4,000 to fix your turbo and components on your BMW, you're beginning to wonder whether that oil was really cheap that you got or whether you should have been going somewhere and getting the right oil. So if you own a European auto, you have got to pay attention and be careful. It's just so much money riding on it. Now, you can go to my website. If you got one of those, again, that is thelubepage.com. I have a channel on YouTube. Just go Dan Watson on YouTube. Type it in. There's at least 70 YouTube videos all about oil, and there's a couple of them about European auto oil. So we can get you the information. We can give you the right advice, but you have to take the time to go find it, okay? And if you have a European auto, the beautiful BMWs, Mercedes, Volvos, Peugeots, wonderful Saabs, all these cars, but they're very expensive to fix. Do yourself a favor and avoid repairs. So I'm going to be back next week one more time, and we'll have another from cyberspace, tip from Jay, and we'll take your calls again next week. So until then, keep rolling.